Hello, welcome to week 5. You're going to be working on the literary analysis essay this week. So I would start by looking at the chapter 8 lecture notes. If you haven't, if you haven't already read chapter 8, go back and do that. So the textbook, this chapter is about analysis, and the textbook talks about how an analysis is a type of argument in which you study the parts of something, a work of art, a group of people, a virus, a bird, migrations, a political rally, a star, anything in order to deepen your understanding. I feel like this book could do a better job of pinpointing what a literary analysis is, and since this is a composition class and it's an English class, you're writing about a story this week. And so I kind of give us a different definition for a literary analysis essay. It's a type of argument in which you look at the piece of writing, a book, a story, poem, or play, and you analyze this piece of text through the lens of a literary element or some kind of literary tool, okay? So that's a long definition, but what I want you to think about is reading this story through the lens, or going back and looking at the story through the lens of some kind of literary element, okay? There's a link you can follow that gives you a list of literary elements that's pretty helpful, and then I have some more documents that we'll look at as well, but this is kind of a short list that gives you some ideas to think about. As far as allegory goes, this is going to be more for like poetry. You won't focus on that very much for a short story. You could look at characterization, so the different types of characters and the various purposes that they serve. You could look at like a character analysis throughout the story. How does a character change and grow, and how does that affect the story? You could look at conflict. This is not mentioned on the webpage, but it is a literary element. If you look at conflict, you would be looking at types of conflict. So man versus nature, man versus society, man versus himself. And you would pick one type of conflict and look at how that is displayed throughout the story. It would not be several different types of conflict. You would pick one type. Ignore the next 2, 3, 4, ignore all of these. These are mainly just about poetry. Go down to plot. You could look at the different elements that make up plot. So what are those different elements? You have exposition, rising action, conflict, climax, following action, and resolution. So if you wanted to choose one element of plot, or maybe talk about how the author uses plot to convey a message through the story, or how it affects the story, that could be something that you could look at. Point of view. What is the point of view of the story? Is it first person? Is it third person limited? Is it third person omniscient? If you don't know what those mean, go back and look them up. And then from that point of view, how does that affect the story? How does that, what do we find out through that point of view? Rhythm is going to be mainly used for poetry. You could talk about setting, especially for this story. The setting is in, it's after the stock market crash of 29. So it's going to be, the 30s and 40s into that area, and it's also in France. So how does that setting kind of bring to life some of the struggles of the characters that they might not have faced somewhere else? And then for some reason theme is not on here, and I don't know why theme isn't on here. I need to update this list. I may try to update this before you get to week 5. So yours may look different once you watch the video. Hopefully it will. And if you have questions about that, you can let me know. But theme is going to be one of those things that you can take out of the context of the story and still apply to life today. So if we think about theme, you wrote kind of about theme for your first essay in the summary essay. You think about how do some of the lessons that we learned from Babylon Revisited, how do these apply to life today out of the context of that story? And that's the key. It has to be out of the context of that story. You could look at tone. You could look at symbolism. Symbolism is going to be an actual object or a person that stands for something else or represents something else. And then you could look at tone. Tone is going to be figured out through word choice. So if you look specifically at word choice, how do we figure out the tone of the story, and what is Fitzgerald trying to convey through that tone? So you will need to read the short story Babylon Revisited. If you have not done so, it's posted under 5.2. So make sure you read that. If you don't know much about Fitzgerald and his life, you might want to go back and just kind of read a little bit about what he did and when he wrote and what he's most known for. Not a super happy person or a happy story, but his writing is very, very famous. So once you, as you read the story, I want you to kind of think of these questions. What parts of the story stand out to me? What do these parts have in common? Why do they stand out? How do these parts align with any of the elements of literature above? And how do the parts stand out to me that make me look at the story differently? And then once you've read the story, you're going to use one literary element. You're going to pick one of the things that we talked about above, and you're going to kind of ask yourself some of these questions based on that literary element, okay? Because you're just looking at one. You're looking at symbolism or theme or plot or conflict or characterization, but you're not doing multiple. You're just picking one, okay? If you want to look at a literary element that's not mentioned above, that's fine. Please just ask me before you fill out your outline. Do not submit an outline with something that we have not already talked about within these notes, okay? Okay, and then you'll make an outline. Here's your sample outline, and then since you've already written the essay over Christmas memory, I have used this essay for our sample literary analysis essay, because I don't want to give you ideas for Babylon Revisited. I want you to have new ideas for that. So I am using, I'm looking at tone, and how Capote uses tone, the tone of humor in Christmas Memory, to convey or to soften the realities of poverty, mental disability, and old age. That he does this kind of through this tone of humor. Okay, so that is that's kind of your outline format, and you'll see your outline assignment later on during this module. And then don't forget that this is how I want your paragraphs structured for your different sentence orders. They need to be in this order for your paragraphs. You will have 2 pieces of evidence per paragraph. Some of you got confused with that in the essay over Christmas Memory, so make sure that you are giving me 2 pieces of evidence per paragraph, and I believe you can have 2 direct quotes for this essay. For the introduction, you need to go back and look up information about Fitzgerald. You could look about like when he published the story, when he first wrote it. Make sure you end your introduction with the thesis statement. For the conclusion, make sure that you start with your rephrase thesis statement and summarize what we've talked about. For your introduction and conclusion, as I was reading your summary essays, I noticed that there were several of you that only gave me like 3 or 4 sentences. For a paragraph to be a complete paragraph, I need 5 complete sentences. So we need to have more sentences than just 3 or 4. Okay. Also want to remind you that we're writing in present tense. I took off a lot of points for past tense verbs in your Christmas Memory essays, so please make sure you're writing in present tense. We write as if the literature is still alive and still happening. We're not going to use first or second pronouns in this essay. Make sure that you are writing at the formality level of a college writing class. For introducers, if you have direct quotes, if it's just narration, you can say the author writes or Fitzgerald writes. If you are quoting a piece of that's already quoted, then put whoever is saying it in the introducer. So if it's Charlie saying it, put the word Charlie. If it's Marion saying it, put Marion, and so on and so forth. Even if you're paraphrasing, you still need to give me some kind of a hint as to who is saying what at the beginning of your paraphrase. And you will need a parenthetical for every paraphrase and direct quote that you have in your essay. So make sure that those are included. And then if you're quoting a quote, remember that your quote goes in 3 quotation marks. So a single quotation, which is the apostrophe, and then the normal quotation marks would go around that. And then also don't forget that short story titles go in quotation marks, not italics. Several of you put Christmas Memory in italics and not quotation marks. Oh, one more thing. Let's talk about the title of your essay. I took a lot of points off for titles not being original. If you turn in your essay and the title is Babylon Revisited, I'm taking off points. So please make it more original than that. Okay, your short story is listed here. Your rubric is here. You'll notice that I took off some points. It's going to be a little bit less points than your summary essay was. It'll be 105 points. I noticed before that I had 12 points for your quotation and paraphrase formatting. And I don't know why I gave you so many points for that. So I took 6 of those off. So if you mess up anything on a paraphrase or direct quote, you'll just lose the whole point for that quote. 6 pieces of evidence total, 2 pages, no longer than 4. Everything else is pretty standard. So 105 points total. There's a sample literary analysis essay here for you to look at. And I don't post this just for my own benefit. I post it for your benefit. So please make sure that you look at this, you use it, that it helps you. That's why it's there. Okay. Also make sure that your information up here looks just like mine. Okay. I give you the date that the essay is due on the sample essay. Please use that date. Please use that format. The class is English 102 and you type it ENGL 102. Please spell my name correctly. A few of you misspelled my name. Not sure how that happened, but you did. And then I think that is all for this week. Let me look at one more thing. Your outline is due on Wednesday, and it is posted here. And then make sure that you are posting your rough draft to your group on this thread, and start doing that by Thursday. Okay. If you have any questions, please send me an email, and I'm going to update those lecture notes so that you have some better feedback on kind of like what lit analysis things to look for, like what literary elements to look for or to use. So hopefully this will be updated when you get yours and you won't have to worry about it. Okay. All right. If you have any questions, send me an email.